Hello and welcome to Songs of SYX. I am the Fiend, and today we're going to be going over our early game military guide. This is going to be for complete new players, and it's going to be going over V.66 as it stands. It will not cover all of the future updates until at least the final build, which I will cover again and release a new guide for all military and, of course, different guides on cities. So, with that in mind, this is going to be essentially covering how you start your military. I'm not going to cover how you start your town. If you don't know how to start a town, I recommend you go check out another guide before you do this one. So, assuming you've already got your population set and you've got at least 75 people. I have 80 right now. Don't mind my food right now. I've just had a couple droughts in a row, like 2 droughts in a row. So our food is a little bit low, but I am very good at managing food and other things in this game. So we're going to scroll up here to a part of town which I have established for military. This portion of town has a few workers. We have 4 here between these 2 buildings, 1 here, so that's 5, and then 5 here. So that's 10 total plus this guy and these 2 haulers. These haulers are essentially keeping this building full so that the 2 guys over here have access to stone, or rather the 1 carpenter has access to stone and wood, so that he can create warhammers, which are essential for our military. So, assuming that you hit Frontex, you're going to be able to get a training ground. The training ground is going to establish your troops as a conscript, but they're not going to be very well trained, and we will show you how to actually do that in a second. So, in order to actually get your troops training, you're going to want to go down to the government building, select the military tab, and go over to training ground. You can build this wherever you like, and you can build it at any size you please, just as it is in all of SYX. But I recommend you build a larger one so that you have plenty of space for all of your trainees to get training. And also make sure that you have enough space between them so they can actually maneuver around them, and get janitors in there as well. Because janitors do need to maintain these buildings a little bit more than average because they're a larger building. So keep that in mind. They also will need furniture and cut stone if you're stone if you're building out of stone like me, or wood if you're building it out of wood, etc. But primarily they're going to need furniture. So make sure you have a stockpile of furniture so that you can get that going. So we're going to speed up time. While they build this in the background, I'm going to go over how you edit your army. So if you hover over this little sword icon here, you're going to see a few different things that you really should pay attention to later on, but aren't going to be super important early game. So you can see our resources there are 27,000 total in value. That does not mean that we have $27,000, but that means that all of our resources combined equals that much. Doesn't really look like it, but we do have a lot of things. We have a lot of ore, we have a lot of coal, we have a lot of furniture and stuff like that are extremely valuable. Plus all of the leather armor and warhammers are going to be making us a lot of money. So that's going to make our enemies a little bit more jelly, and they're going to try to raid us. These aren't going to be actual factions; they're just going to be raiders. In the next update, there's going to be individual raider armies that will be traveling around the map. But as that is not part of the game currently, don't worry about them. So beneath that, you'll have your denarii and slaves, of which I have 0. So that increases our obscurity to 9.46, depending on how much actions we've taken in the world, how many different factions we've interacted with, etc. It will lower that obscurity and completely lower it to the point where we have none left, and then that will allow us to be raided by others. When we have no obscurity and we have high riches, we're going to start to get hit by a lot of raids. But the way that we're going to counteract that is by having a large army, a large standing garrison, so that our troops will deter any kind of raids from would-be attackers. So if you click on that little sword there, you can see we have 4 different default divisions. Each division is labeled 0 to 3. They're numbered, you could name them, you could do whatever you please, and we'll get over that when we get to the editing stage. But early on, you're going to see that you have a bunch of different things up here. So you can see the campaigning troops, so we have 0. We have 0 out of 200 total trained troops. Of course, we only have 80, so we're not going to be able to train up 200 troops. We have 0 out of 0 training, which of course we have nowhere to train, and the same with the archery training. We have full leather armor, and you can see each one of these is going to be each resource related to your army. So the ideal is if you have 50 guys and they are all equipped with 1 leather armor, you're going to need at least 50. If they have 2, that's going to make it 100, etc., etc. So when you start, I always recommend that you disband all of these additional regiments or divisions. I call them regiments, they are divisions. I'm going to mix that up a lot, so I apologize. So you're going to go ahead, disband these guys here by clicking on them with left click and then just disbanding like that. And the reason why you're doing this is because later on, when you have more guys, you're really not going to want to have more divisions. You're really going to want to have larger divisions, especially as melee troops. When they are in a larger group, they have more overall morale. Each individual person has morale. Each individual person has an attack skill. Each person will be attacking. So if you have 50 guys in a group and you face off against 100, obviously the 100 will win. If you have 2 groups of 50, smushing them, you can obviously do better, but that individual group of 50 guys is going to have a lower morale than that 100-man group, and therefore they will be at it for a longer time, and the 100 men will actually withstand that attack better than if they were attacked by 200 men from either side. So I recommend you keep that in mind and you work with your numbers. So if you see a group of guys with 36 and you have 50 in your group, of course, attack them. But if you have 50 and there's 150, do not bum rush them with just those 50 guys. Unless it's your only choice, really don't do that. And these are things you'll understand later on. If you're completely confused as to what I'm saying now, don't worry. A lot of this stuff I'm saying is mid-game, kind of mid-military game, which I won't be covering at all. So you'll have to kind of figure that out on your own. So when you click on this division, you'll see that it's highlighted in white. And this will allow you to edit the division's stats, everything about them, basically. You can click on this edit bar here, and this will allow you to rename them. So we'll name them the Human Guards. We can name them number 1 if we'd like, or we could say Red Guard. Whatever we want. We could say High Guards. Whatever you choose. And you can change their emblem or banner here by clicking on this and selecting a new banner. You can control click and remove portions of the actual banner itself and redesign them. So if you wanted to, you could make little symbols on the side of your sword here to tell you like this guy is a little faster than average. Oops. So you know he's a fast guy. You can adjust the colors. So let's say we wanted to make this a bright blue or dark blue here, and then we could lower it here and make it a black. We can change colors. So if you remove all colors or you add all the colors, it will change it from white, or if you remove them all, it will turn it black. Just as you know, there's no black quote unquote, but you can make those colors. So we'll have it gray, and then we can adjust the background on it too. So you can make it dark red like that, or a nice red, add a little bit of green to turn it yellow, etc., etc. Whatever color you feel, whatever fits the mood of the guys that you are training. So now that that's done, if you were to click out of this, they would actually delete all of this. So I recommend you get into the habit of clicking accept, and that will keep them as the Human High Guards with their red banner and everything, so you can get back in there and train or change however you want them to be changed. And if you click this little arrow, you're going to be able to adjust what race you're training here. So depending on what race you're playing or what races are available in your city, you'll be able to train different groups. I recommend you use them to their best abilities. Each group I have gone over, but I will briefly explain what they're good for. Humans are just your average baseline troop. Kryptonians are very, very low morale, but very heavyweight. The Dundarians are kind of mid-crown, very sturdy troops. Their counterparts, the Garthinis, are great flankers, but very, very low morale. Then we have the Emevians, who are ultimately the best troops all around, who are just capable of everything and a little bit heavier than average, a little bit better at everything than everyone else. And then the Talapis, who have extremely high morale and a little bit or a lot less weight. So in melee, they're not going to be doing as much damage, but they will not collapse. So they are great at melee nonetheless, but try to keep them in the flanks, try to keep them attacking lighter armed troops as they will not stand up against a group of amphibians, especially if they're well-trained amphibians, or anyone like that. So, here you can see the soldier's target, the amount of people you'd like to have. I used to start the game with a 20-man group, just so that I had 20 people trained up to go. Actually, we need some wood in the background here while I do this. So, I would do that in the beginning when I started playing the game. I recommend you keep it at 50. You're going to be hitting 75. We used to have to get it at around 20 or 30, I can't remember. So when we got our training ground early on, we would get raided very early by at least 4 or 5 guys, so having 20 was really valuable. Now, you'll be seeing groups of at least 30, so I recommend training up to at least 50. Ideally, though, you'll want to train every single person in your town, so we will set this up to 80 for right now. When you set these melee training options, you'll notice at the bottom left here, there's an amount of days it will take to train this division to specification. So, to just train these 80 guys up to this .2 attack and .2 defensive skill, which will make them an average or a base conscript, it will take 3 days of training. If you don't have enough food or you don't have enough people in your city, I don't recommend doing this. So, because we will actually set this many. We're going to hit accept like that. So these guys are going to get to it. We don't have any other resources to worry about, but when we do have leather armor, we can click one tab for this and one tab for that, and they will equip these when they get attacked or if they go into the world map, depending on if they're stockpiled in an army surplus depot or not. Or army supply depot, I should say. So we're going to set that like that, and you can see now it's 9 out of 50 and 4 out of 50. So they are not fully equipped. 4 people will get a weapon, and 9 people will get a pair of leather armor. It's not varied. It doesn't say specifically that the guy will get a leather armor and a warhammer. The guy might have no armor and a warhammer, and vice versa. So just keep that in mind. You really want to get each person in the army both. And that can be pretty easily achieved just by a little bit of patience. So while we sit here in the background, we let these guys train up. We're going to finish our road here. Alright, now we've got our guys training. They should get to it. We've got at least 30 slots for trainees, so they're going to be filling that up completely. You can see we have minus 30 workforce. Sometimes a good idea to keep less space so that these guys aren't taking up all of your precious workers, especially early game. You don't really want to use them up. So we're going to let them train for a little bit, and we're going to see in a minute how they're doing. Alright, now we have our 50 guys trained up, ready to go, and you can see that I've gone in here and I've added 10% melee training here, so that they have a little bit more melee training. It took 3 days to get them base training. It's going to take another 13 days to get them up to 10%. This will make them overall more effective as a fighting force, and protect you way more than if they weren't trained at all. So make sure you at least give them some training. It's going to take you little time at all. Mainly food and time is all you have to worry about. So, with that being said, we have one last thing to go over before we end the early game guide. I'm not going to go over raids, as raids are pretty self-explanatory, and I think battle is pretty simple. All you really have to do is establish a good line and hold the line. Alright, so now the next thing we want to go over is our battle option here. So we have multiple tabs up on the top right. And the middle one here is battle, next to our world and our capital. So we're going to click battle, and you can see we have this division over here, human high guards, and they're moving. There's 50 of them. If I click it, it will put a little green arrow over everyone's head in this entire town who is part of the division, and you can take this little Tetris block, I guess you'd call it, and draw a line. You can see these little white spots are where the troops will line up. So if I wanted to have them in a tight-knit formation, or even in a line walking, we can have them like that. Or if we want to have them spread out, we'll have them form like this. And you can see they're facing towards the arrow outwards, and the little circle is where their face would be pointing. So let's get them set right there. That's going to be a muster point, and you can see this little bar here is going to give us a bunch of different options, and this is how I'm going to explain to you guys how to utilize the bar for your battles. I'm not going to go over early battle guide because that would require me to actually get into a battle, and I usually don't. I recommend you don't, essentially because it's going to cost you a lot more of your troops' lives than you really want to. In early game, if you lose like 50 or 100 to a battle, you could come back to your capital and realize that you have a lot of people who now are missing and you can't replace, and you were already having a hard time for. So I recommend you try to keep your security up above the point where they will raid you, so you don't have to fight raids until you're at least comfortable with battle in general. So that means get to 3, 4, 500 people, or have a surplus of a couple hundred. Therefore, those guys, so you can lose them and not worry, and you can kind of practice that way. But this muster option isn't going to exist in the battle zone, obviously, but it will in this world battle here. But if you're in a map battle, you're not going to see it. You're going to see that this is, when soldiers are in position, they'll break it. If you click this, they will scatter and they will just start chasing down everybody in an area around them. This is extremely bad for morale, but extremely good if you've already won the battle and you just want to finish them off. And make sure guys are attacking. You can see we have loose formation and tight formation. They do exactly what they say. They increase defense and obviously decrease offense, and the vice versa for this one. They don't have any range, but this allows you to toggle their fire at will, and then you can see if they have a bow or not, and the time it takes to actually reload. I did not notice that, but there is a reloading time right there. So without any skill at all, it says it takes 1,000 seconds to reload. That's a very long time. You can see we have this option here to make soldiers move faster. Now this is going to be your best friend as a melee troop, as a ranged troop, as whatever troop flankers. This guy is going to be your best friend, your favorite button, and make sure you always click this one when you have these guys on right here. So this is going to have troops move faster. They will fatigue obviously quicker, but they will hit groups with a little bit more force, and they will reach their position much quicker, allowing you for better maneuvers, better attacks, better defense, everything. It's just going to be overall better. Make sure you're always trying to move your troops quickly, especially because fatigue doesn't really matter. I've never noticed fatigue becoming an issue, as usually guys in full plate are going to fatigue a lot faster, but when they're completely unarmored, they're not going to. So don't worry about that too much, especially when the troops are early game. So having them with this will allow them to move faster. And then this here is the charge option. Charging is a skill tactic. I think that a lot of players want to charge and get that glorious charge, and then when they see their troops completely just dismantle and fall apart as they charge forward, they lose faith in the game. It's mostly because your troops have no morale and they have no training. They are not equipped for a real charge. Anyone below 20% is not going to do well in a charge unless they have technology to back them up. So in order to get a good charge, make sure you have higher trained guys, at least 30% training in their melee training, so that when they hit an enemy or run towards them, they don't lose morale as their cohesion starts to break. These can be very useful attacks, but I find that often not. They will leave your guys knocked over and bleeding, and the other guys are just kind of still standing there looking at you like, what just happened? So very, very specific attacks, very skill-based maneuver here, the charge. And then you have your defensive formation, which is a simple one. You literally just have your guys stay in a defensive form. If they have shields, they'll use their shields more. If they are fighting in melee, they will use less offense, they will use more defense, of course. And then you can cancel their attack or cancel whatever they're doing by clicking on stop all divisions or clear targets. If I had multiple divisions, I could shift click them all. You can click here and then shift click the face over here or whatever, and it would click all the ones in between. I don't have them, so you can't see that, but if I did, that was how that would work. So we're going to muster them. We're going to get them to come over here, and while they muster, if they have equipment set in their equipment here, they will go and gather that equipment. So you'll see this guy is going to go over here, and he's going to grab a piece of equipment. And they're all going to grab pieces of equipment until there is nothing left for them to grab, and they will walk over here and they will assemble. So if you take this into account, if a troop is hungry and has to also grab his equipment, and the equipment is on the other side of the city, and the food is on the other half of that city, your guys will starve to death before they even get the chance to defend yourself on this world map here, this capital map, I should say. I keep confusing them as world map and capital map. World map is going to be when you get raided and you enter some foreign piece of land that's not yours and you start a battle. Capital is when you're fighting here on your town here. And this is arguably much more difficult, as it takes quite some time for your troops to assemble. And I recommend you keep your eye on this capital as well, because when their formation is like this, they can start to starve. So if you're not paying attention like this, they will starve to death, and you will lose your troops that way. So now that they're ready to go, there looks like there's one more he's coming. You can draw lines, and they will move exactly towards that line. But you'll notice that they sometimes will break up in their formation exactly where, I don't know, or why, I don't really know. But sometimes, depending on how far their formation goes, they will form up in a group like this, like a little blob, and then reline up. So if you want to avoid that, we can have them form up a line right here. If you'd like to have them move up in a nice cohesive line, you'll have them reline up in their position here, and don't worry about it being completely straight, and then draw it in smaller increments forward, and they will kind of move within that line there. If you were to draw it too far away, they will start to break up and form into that square again, and when that happens, these guys will become extremely weak. You do not want them to form up into that little square, as a guy in this formation could hit you and easily envelop you. You always want to focus on an envelopment. So if an enemy was in this tree line, let's say an enemy was this little square, I can't draw, but there is a square here, picture it. What we would want to do is we would want to draw our line over the square. If the square was here, we want to draw our line over the square, having our troops surround them. So these guys, the middle, are going to hit hard. They're going to be in combat, and they're not going to be doing too well, but these guys will surround them. Once that they're like that, you're going to tighten the formation up around that square. So if this was their little square, you'll have your guys' formation tighten around them, having each troop engage with somebody. The way that fighting happens in 6 is if you attack a unit by clicking on them, they will simply just attack that unit and kind of do this little shimmy around. They don't really know what they're trying to do. Let's have them disband, actually, so they don't start starving. They don't know what they're trying to do, so in order to get them to know what they're doing, you need to give them a correct command where they're going to go and have them go through the unit rather than attack it, quote-unquote. Attack usually only works for ranged units who are attacking a unit from a ranged position. That way they know which one to target. Alright, and with that being said, I think I have covered everything necessary for you as a new player to do your best as a Songs of 6 general. I recommend you get out there and play with the game yourself. Test it out. It's a free demo. There's all kinds of stuff to learn, and the earlier versions are a lot easier militarily than the newer versions, so I recommend if you want to go check out one of the earlier versions, especially V.64. That version is pretty easy. V.65 can be quite challenging. V.66 is very good, but equally as challenging. So for those new players, if you're really interested and you're struggling, go check out some of the older builds too. You'll lose some of the good stuff, but you also get to be able to play with the military a little bit easier, or you could lower the difficulty overall. It's up to you. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Please be sure to leave a like, as these videos are quite challenging to make. They require a little bit more editing, a little bit more time. So with that being said, I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.